Builders, backstories, breakthroughs. This is the Journey in Conversation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Journey in Conversation. And this is the first one that we are recording in 2026. So happy New Year to everybody at home and away. I've got on the show with me today the spectacular Jeff Sesol. He's the CEO and founder of Pull the Chute. Really interesting guy, hosts his own podcast and does a lot of consulting. So I'm really excited to get into today's show with him. Jeff, happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year to you, Paul. I'm doing great. It's a wonderful beginning to a new year. It's always great to start fresh and to feel good and to kind of set some new goals and new plans and feel rejuvenated. I took 2 weeks off during the holidays and really rested for the first time in a long time. And so, I kind of hit the ground running this week. So it's good. It's fun.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like a lot of us when we go on vacation, we we tend to ignore that rest part, and we make plans and we go on trips and we go, overseas or to a different state or city or province. We go camping, and that's great. Like it's new experiences and it's what you want to spend your time with. But I've found over the years that vacations are very rarely relaxing.
Yeah. Well, about 2 years ago, my wife challenged me to not look at my emails. We took a week in Wisconsin. She challenged me not to look at my emails. And by the third day, I was having an anxiety attack. But then I got through that, and then the rest of the week was great. And so this 2 weeks, I must have looked at my phone maybe twice, through the Christmas and New Year's holiday. And, I had hundreds of emails when I got back on Monday, but I thought, I'm okay with that. I got some rest, and so that's good.
Yeah, and if you can go into it expecting that when you come back, there's going to be a little bit of craziness, that's okay, right? Like it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about you. For the folks at home, can you give us a little bit of your origin story, whether it's superhero or supervillain?
Sure.
Where'd you come from? What have you done? Like, what brought you to where you are today?
Well, I'll try to compress it as best I can. Chicago, born and raised, Chicago suburbs, south suburbs. Started my corporate career at Harris Bank in Chicago back in 1980. Yeah, I'm the old guy. I was a self-taught. I went to college for 2 years, hated it. It was too slow. So I taught myself how to program, and I ended up automating the entire trust fee department at Harris Bank. I left there in 1992 because they got bought out by Bank of Montreal. By 1993, I started my first entrepreneurial venture, which was a company called FuturesNet. It was a network. It was a pre-internet network for the futures and options industry. So think of pork bellies and corn and beans and orange juice and all that stuff. We did that, and then we took it to the internet in 96. And in 1998, we noticed that everyone was using one piece of the platform more than any other, which is the ability to upload a file from your PC to our servers and get to it from any web browser. And so we called it Free Drive, Free Drive. It was a free disk drive on the internet. And one of my small claim to fame in life is I'm one of the founding fathers of what we know today as web-based storage, because it didn't exist in 1998. We built it. It took us 18 months to get our first million users. Only took 13 weeks to get the next million, 11 weeks to get the next million, 10 weeks to get the next million, and the hockey stick curve took off. By 2001, we had 18 million users worldwide. We sold the majority share to Motorola, a company called EDS out of Plano, Texas, and EMC out of Hopkinton, Massachusetts. For the next 2 years, because I was the CTO, I was the technology evangelist for Free Drive, because I knew how it all worked. I designed it. And so I traveled the country looking at new technologies that would fit into it and speaking in front of 5,000 or 5,000 people. Probably the coolest job I ever had in my life. Up till now, I love it. I mean, it was really cool. Then I went into consulting, just helping companies grow. And it started out by me automating their operations. And then I quickly learned that to make companies grow, it's not about the operations and streamlining things. It's really about taking care of your people. And so I started focusing more on that. And so, I helped several companies grow, one from 2 million a year to 24 million a year, and one from 6.1 million a year to, so 1.6 million a year to 6.4 million a year. And all I did was, kind of get the people focused, get them to understand that they were, just a part of the company, part of the process, right? They were appreciated. They had a voice. They could say things and people would listen and all that stuff. And it really has changed my whole philosophy in how to grow a business. You know, I mean, people say, look, you can have a great idea and a terrible, staff, and you'll never go anywhere. You can have a mediocre idea and a great staff, and you can take it to the moon and back. Right? And that's really how it works a lot of times. So so I started Pull the Chute in September of 21 after some self-reflection through 2020, like a lot of us did. And I'd been consulting for a better part of 20 years. And I said, look, I don't know if the consulting's my future. What's your legacy going to be? And I said, well, what do you like to do? And I said, I love to help people and companies grow and be the best they can be. I said, okay, there's your mission statement. How are you going to do it? And I said, well, I can do it through coaching, because if I can coach, I can help more companies all at once. Consulting is one of those where you kind of get in ground or, integrated with the whole company. I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to visit with them. So I called it Pull the Chute because I went skydiving when I was 40. And you go 14,000 feet up in a plane and you tumble out and you're falling at 120 miles an hour. And everything's happening so fast. It's hard to breathe. Won't move your hands. You're spinning out of control. Everything's happening so fast. You can't see where you're at and you can't see where you're going. But at 5,500 feet, you pull the chute. So then you can breathe again. You're in control, see where you're at and see where you want to go. And as I tell people, isn't that a lot like being in business? And isn't that a lot like life? And so my whole goal is to get people to, quote unquote, pull the chute. I try to do it once a week for an hour with most of my clients, and just have them take a breath, have them feel in control, see where they're at and see where they want to go. And, because you need to work on your business sometimes and not always be in it. And as business owners, we have a tendency to always be in it. And we say, I don't have time to work on it. And so that's what we do here at Pull the Chute. We have offices in London, Nova Scotia, Chicago, and Nashville. And we're very excited. We have our own podcast called Pull the Chute, which talks a lot about that stuff. And I have 2 books out. Sorry, you're getting the whole bits here. I have 2 books out. One was called Taking a Business to New Heights. The second one's called The New Leadership Landscape, Redefining True Leadership. And so that's how I got to where I'm at today. But you know what? It's amazing. I love it. And I'm just having a ball, just being able to take, I'm 65, I've got a lot of experience, and to be able to take that experience and just help others to grow and be the best they can be, better than, anything else in the world to me.
Yeah. At some point you turn your focus, your attention to legacy. What are you going to contribute to the world, to the community around you that has lasting meaning?
Right.
Money's great. Don't get me wrong. Money is a nice thing. Like, having money affords you the freedom to do what you want to do, but you can't take it with you, and it's not a great scoreboard for what you leave behind. So being able to kind of transfer your experiences to other people is, it's a fantastic calling. There's some really interesting things in what you said in your introduction that I kind of want to talk about. So we're going to veer a little bit from the established format here. The first thing that stuck out to me is free drive. Mid to late 90s. Interesting to me that that product existed back then. I mean, it makes perfect sense that it would. You think about the problems of portability of data and shipping data in the 90s from point A to point B, especially long distances, right? And you think about some of the challenges with bandwidth at the time. Back then you're operating on modems in kind of like commercial environments that are 56.6K over the telephone line, the landline, right? And there's long distance charges. So for a long time, companies just shipped stuff in the mail or by courier on discs, right? Kind of crazy to think. But so Motorola buys free drive, and then you kind of go on this tour evangelizing free drive and speaking and really looking at how to grow the technology platform. What is kind of a question mark for me, and what I kind of want to talk about a little bit, is what happened in kind of the early to mid 2000s, because to me this sounds like you guys would have had a fairly significant head start on Dropbox, right? Because they started in 2007, 2008, something like that, and it was pretty much the same premise. It was like, it sucks to sync your data between devices in A to B. Like, we're going to centralize that. So like, what decisions were kind of in the middle there that had Motorola move that away from where they could compete really strongly with Dropbox, because Dropbox is, it's ubiquitous now.
Yeah, right. And it's interesting because we were doing the same things as Dropbox. Like there was a free drive folder on your computer that you just drag and drop things into, right? Just like Dropbox. I would say two things happened. One is that the internet bubble burst. So we were a little bit early. We weren't generating the revenues that we needed to generate. We were generating some revenues based on ads, but we weren't generating enough revenues. And part of the problem was, you mentioned it yourself, bandwidth, right? We were spending $500,000 a month on bandwidth, which is insane. And we were probably spending, another, for computers, for servers, we were probably spending another, $250,000 to $300,000 a month. So we raised a bunch of money. Motorola bought us out, put a bunch of money into it, but it didn't last more than 18 months. And then when they went back to the well to say, okay, we need more money, here's where we're going with it, everyone was a little bit afraid because of the internet bubble had burst. And so what's the true, quote unquote, value of this company, right? And so that was a, again, living through so many different things, that was a tough pill to swallow. It actually, Free Drive actually got sold to X Drive, which was a competitor. And then all that eventually got sold to AOL. So the original code for Free Drive all sits at AOL now. So, but that's kind of what happened. Yeah. Timing and longevity is everything, right? So we kind of plowed the road. I mean, we had 6 million users before we had any competition worldwide, right? I mean, nobody was out there, and then there was iDrive, and then there was X Drive, and then there was, different ones like that. And what we did too is we offered, and this was really cool. We had probably 8,000 to 12,000 websites that had the ability from their website to store files in Free Drive, but we made it look like it was, so we white labeled it. So you could go to a site, and because what it did is it would take people's attention span on websites from, 45 to 55 seconds to 3.5 minutes on average, which was huge from an advertising standpoint now, right? Because, you're doing that because they're uploading files. And so you got them, you advertise to them, and, you're making money that way. That was the key driver behind Free Drive was the advertising piece. And we actually, one of the things that we almost got put into play was the ability to actually show commercials while the files are being uploaded. Right. So instead of just seeing this file go back and forth like it's uploading it, we were actually doing commercials in there. One of the biggest problems we ran into, though, is, as you discussed earlier, was still the era of modems. And so we didn't have high-speed internet. And so it would really slow down the upload. And so we got a lot of pushback on that. So then we had to ask people if they wanted to see the commercial, right? Versus, forcing them to see the commercial.
Yeah, so, there's some interesting things there, right? Like you can absolutely be too early with a great product and a great idea, and you also think about in your case with Free Drive, like the $500,000 a month on bandwidth costs. You throw that number out there, and depending on the size of the organization today, like if you said, "Oh, we're spending $500,000 a month on bandwidth to Netflix," they'd be like, "Hold my beer."
Yeah,
right. But back then, $500,000 a month on bandwidth that's a significant amount of change, and you also have to deal with like your economies of scale in hardware and the cost curve, because storage was a lot more expensive back then than it is now.
So here's the number. Our very first 1 terabyte, 3 terabyte from EMC cost us $1 million for 3 terabytes of space. Then we bought a 9 terabyte machine, and it cost us $6 million, right? And so today you can get a terabyte, again, not as sophisticated, don't get me wrong, but you can get a terabyte for $100, And so those were all some of the issues, was that, we exploded, and we had the who's who as our board of directors, by the way. Andy McKenna, who ran the Chicago Cubs, Jack Sander, president of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Philip Fupkowski, who had Platinum Technologies. We were like the who's who of everything. We had an amazing board of directors, and they were guiding us the best they could. But we were in uncharted territories. No one really knew how to do, these guys were all business guys, right? But no one had ever done web storage before, and how do you kind of work your way through that? So, we can look at the business numbers and say, that's not making sense. But it was like, okay, how do you make it sense? Because no one's ever done it before. And that was one of the struggles, right? How do you make money? And the good news for Dropbox is that they came after us. So they saw a lot of our mistakes and they were able to kind of adjust.
Yeah, second mover advantage can sometimes be a big deal, right? Like we all talk about first mover advantage being the be all end all of running down the track, right? But sometimes it's second mover advantage that really gets you to a place where you can build a big business and scale something up. There's something to be said for coming in the trailblazers' footsteps, because a lot of trailblazers, even if they're doing fantastic things, and even if they have everything right, they have all the pieces of the puzzle, they have the road figured out and charted, trailblazers will often stumble because it's like you say, it's uncharted territory. And navigating uncharted territory it's incredibly difficult, and it's scary. It's big. There's nothing to draw experience from.
I mean, think about, issues that we ran into. Servers would reach a capacity of 70%. And we'd have to throw a whole line of servers on. Well, that would normally take days. We figured out through a ghost disk how to do it in hours. But again, had to figure that out, right? Load balancing, which is no big deal today. Back then, we'd have one server be at 80%, one server be at 20%. How do you balance where the calls come in from and all that stuff? We broke more load balancing softwares and hardwares through our time than I care to count on one. It was like crazy because we kept trying, and then all of a sudden, this would go wrong because the volumes were so huge. I mean, think about it. We had 18 million users, and by the time we sold it to Xdrive, it was 28 million users, worldwide.
Yeah, you think about that problem with scaling, like load balancing. Yep, absolutely. Like to some extent today, still a bit of a challenge. You need to have the right strategy in place to make it work. But we think about scaling storage capacity and memory capacity. Back then, what you're describing is, you would need to go into the data center that you owned and operated, maybe through a subcontractor or something, right? But you'd need to go in there and add the physical resources yourself, and you'd need to figure out how to plan ahead for that demand. Today, there's autoscalers. You have a hyperscaler that you do business with, whether it's Google Cloud, whether it's Azure, whether it's AWS, and you just set your parameters for auto scaling and say, okay, so when we hit this threshold, add this much more, blah, 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 blah. Done. That was not a thing.
Not a thing at all. So, but a great time in my life as far as an entrepreneur. We learned a ton, and I've been able to use all those lessons as I've gone forward now. How to control people, how to make people want to work. Again, this goes back to the encourage your people, appreciate your people. Real quick, if I could tell a story, I had two guys. So every quarter we would take the team out because, again, we were big on thank you guys, thank you, appreciate what you're doing. And so one time we took them to Chicago Cubs game. One time we went to the back room of the restaurant behind us. It was called Jack's Tap. I don't even know if it's still there, but we ran out the back room. We went back there, and we always like to pick out one or two people that have really stepped up, right? And so I'm thanking them all, and I said, by the way, how many of you have worked a 40-hour work day for us? And this girl raises her hand. She goes, you mean week, right? I go, no, day. She goes, I don't know what that means. And I said, well, that's when people like Josh and Bunty, these were our database guys, would come in on a Monday, and I'd force them to go home on a Wednesday. Now, I didn't ask them to stay. As a matter of fact, it was just the opposite. The story was that they came in on a Monday, and I worked the 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift, and my business partner, Mike, worked the noon to 10 shift. We wanted to cover a lot of hours and we allowed the programmers to come in whenever they wanted. It wasn't a 9-to-5 business, right? Because you learn some people work better at night, and great, let's do it. So I was leaving at 4 o'clock, and I looked at the guys, and I said, all right, now make sure you guys go home tonight. And they said, oh, yeah, we're working on this problem, but we'll go. I come in the next morning, and we had given them a room, not just the database guys, but the programmers, a room with overstuffed furniture, video games, movies, refrigerator full of beer, pool table, dartboard. Because sometimes you just had to step away and do something else. Because again, we were doing stuff that didn't exist, right? And so there's a note on the door that says, wake us at 9. I go, you guys killing me, right? So I wake up at 9, I go in there and I go, what happened? I thought you were going home. yeah, we were, but we solved the problem. So we just wanted to keep it going. And look what we were able to do, and blah, blah, blah. And he says, we just got one more thing that we're working through, but, I think we can work on that a little bit today. And I go, okay. So at 4:00 on Tuesday, I go, all right, you are going home, right? Yeah, we're going home. I go, have we solved the problem that we've been working on? We're really close. I think we got to figure it out. All right, but you're going home, right? Yeah, we're going home. I'm in Wednesday. Sure enough, sign on the door. Wake us at 9. I go, you guys are killing me. And they're like, yeah, but we got it fixed. We're great, right? Now, again, I kept asking them to please go home, right? So finally it got to be about noon, and I walked up to Joshua. So Bunty was about a 5'6", 145-pound guy. Josh was 6'4", 285. So I walked up to Josh and I go, dude, you need to go home. He goes, no, I'm going to go. No, you haven't showered in 3 days. I need you to go home. You're becoming offensive. Right? But the power of that is one of the things that is my driving factor today, which is we appreciated our people. We gave them things. I recognized them. And they'll go the extra yard for you then, right? They were part of it. We'd go into a room and we'd start drawing on the marker board, and everyone had input. Everyone had ideas, it was up to somebody else to go, I don't think that's going to work because, right? You can't just say, I don't think it's going to work. Tell me why. Right. And so that got everyone really working together. And that truly was the success of Free Drive, was the people.
It's interesting to think about how that really works. And we tend to use fancy words like, aligned incentives and incentive structures. We tend to think about these kinds of dynamics through that lens, right? But at the end of the day, a lot of the time, incentive structures and aligned incentives is as simple as you're saying, treat your people well, respect, treat them with decency, pay them enough money to make sure that they can live the life that they want to live, right? Like, don't squeeze them that way. We overcomplicate this stuff a lot when 99% of the time, it's really simple.
Yeah. No, so there was a study done 3 years ago when they called it the Great Resignation. 4 million people a month were moving jobs. The reason they were moving jobs is 82% of them felt unappreciated. Only 12% left for more money, right? Which speaks volumes, just volumes, right? Give them, don't make them work 9 to 5. And this is the other thing COVID gave us, which I love, is that people don't necessarily all work 9 to 5 well, right? And so a lot of them are working from home. And so I had a client, and he's like, yeah, but I'm paying them to work from home. But, what if they're not there? And I go, first of all, do you think you're overpaying them? Oh, no, I think I'm paying them well. Okay. Are they doing the job? Oh, yeah, they're doing the job. Okay. Have they ever missed a deadline? No. Okay, so where's the issue? He goes, well, but we're there from 9 to 5. I want them there from 9 to 5. And I go, so if everything's getting done, if you don't feel like you're overpaying them, and it's just that you want them at their desk so that they can be at your beck and call, maybe we need to loosen the reins a little bit so that they can actually be themselves and get more work done. Because you'll find out that they'll probably do more for you. They might work at night more, where if you're making them work 9 to 5, they're done at 5, right? And programmers especially are this way. Let a programmer work during the night, man. They're happy. That's what they want. Me, no. I'm a 6 a.m. guy.
I find with my own kind of patterns of work and everything, there are some tasks where I'm better in the morning. The kind of cognitive load that those tasks require, it's just better in the morning for me. But there's some stuff that 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, I'll sit down and have my laptop and a cup of tea or something and just be going at it and be, kind of getting my stride on a roll. And all of a sudden it's 2 in the morning. I'm like, whoa, how did that happen?
Yeah. No, that would never happen in my life.
One question that kind of comes up for me as you're talking about the fellows at xDrive. If there's one piece of advice that today Jeff could give, Jeff in the Free Drive days, what would it be? What would you want to tell your past self?
I think 2 things that come to mind. One is remember to stay humble and don't get overly cocky. We had the world by the short hairs, and everyone knew it. I mean, we were the darlings. I could speak in front of 5,000 people about why we had been so successful, and I did. everyone wanted to hear from us. And so when that happens, it was a little bit hard to stay humble. We thought we're impenetrable. We own this market. We have it cornered. And the second thing would have been to don't underestimate the cost. So we raised a bunch of money to grow, and so many things went wrong that we ended up spending probably twice that much, right? And so I would have said to myself, make sure you have enough for the long road, because had we had enough for the long road, I'd be sitting in a completely different place right now, right? Because we'd be Dropbox comparable kind of things, right? Now we're a flash in the pan, and half of the people haven't even heard of Free Drive. Back then, everyone had heard of it. You got 28 million users worldwide were using this thing, and we had huge ideas to reshape the way that things worked. One of the things that we did was all the servers were in Plano, Texas. All the servers and all the storage devices were in Plano, Texas. Problem was if you were over in England, that took a while to get there, right? If you were in Asia, it took a while to get there. So my whole thought was, which exists now, let's build data centers and put all the servers and the storage closer to the big hubs. Put one in England, put one in the middle of Germany or by Germany, put one in Asia, just start putting these big hubs all over, which we call data centers today, that can do all that, and you're a lot closer, and the latency is nothing then. Because that was one of the complaints, was the latency. But again, hindsight is easy to say that. Back then, we thought we, owned the world, and I learned quickly to be humble, and not that I was overly cocky, but I just felt like we had this figured out when we really didn't.
Yeah, latency is much more manageable when you're talking about a website that's sending files around that are kilobytes, right? Like an HTML document, 50 kilobytes, it's gzipped. Your latency to send something from a data center in Plano, Texas to Japan is not going to be that appreciable. Right. But when you're talking about big files, when you're talking about videos, when you're talking about like meaty PDFs that are megabytes, maybe a gigabyte, then latency starts to matter a whole lot more, because you're adding minutes and in some cases hours to that transport time for files. And for the folks at home, just some context. Jeff has said we were on top of the world. We had 28 million users. For some context, at that point in time, there were not nearly as many internet users, and the internet was not as accessible. So 28 million would have captured a bunch of the total number of addressable users worldwide. 28 million today, not a big number for users, but then, very big number of users. So just some added context for our listeners back home.
That's a great point. Yeah, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah. Another thing that you said earlier kind of stuck out for me. We were talking a little bit about blazing a trail and how difficult it is to do something that has never been done before. It strikes me that there are a lot of parallels between that journey that you folks would have been taking and the journey that AI companies are taking today, because they're doing things that, let's face it, they're new in this context. Sure, machine learning, AI, it's been around for a while, but the modern context of general purpose transformers and kind of the associated tool sets and the models that are deployed into these hyperscalers, it's new. None of these folks are profitable. And there are also hardware considerations that kind of come into play, right? Like if we think about the hardware stuff that the AI companies are kind of doing, and you've got NVIDIA, which is now the world's most valuable company because they make these massive cluster chips, H200s are the most advanced, that are used in data centers for AI purposes. Do you ever think about that, Jeff? Like, do you draw any parallels between kind of your journey and what you read in the news about the journey of, Perplexity and Mistral, OpenAI, those kinds of guys, what they're trying to do?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up, because I just had the conversation about a month ago with someone. We talked about this, and we said, look, we were early adopters of the internet, where people were like, what is this internet thing, right? And I'll never forget being on a panel, and my whole goal was just to educate people on what is the internet, because they had no clue, right? And again, we were such early adopters that it was great. The biggest issue that we ran into, that I see AI running into, but can solve the problems if the right prompts and questions are asked is we were inventing stuff that didn't exist to kind of plow the road, right? We were inventing the plow and the shovels and whatever, right? Um, AI you can ask AI that question and it can probably solve it way faster where we didn't have that ability. So I think things are going to move faster. It's funny when we were first starting to move to the internet, I wasn't sure of the internet. And so I talked to this gentleman in New York and I said, look, should we move to the internet? Is it going to be something? He said, Jeff, the internet is going to be amazing. And I said, well, like credit cards and stuff like that. He goes, look, the problem with credit cards is already solved. He goes, what you have to realize is that there's more brain power being used than ever before in the history of the world for one particular thing called the internet, right? And right now, that's probably 1,000 times with AI, because not only do we have mental people, physical people, we have AI, right? Which can do things at a fraction of what we do. I think it's gonna take a little while to tame the beast. That we got to be careful about that. We've all seen the Hollywood movies, so we don't need another Skynet. but I think if used properly, I mean, the advances that this can make go far beyond anything the internet could ever have done. Meaning, think of hospitals and health and research and all that stuff that cure for cancer. I would love that. We just got back from a funeral yesterday. My brother-in-law passed away from lung cancer, right? Well, wouldn't it be great if somebody could diagnose that right away and tell you exactly how to pinpoint it and get rid of it, right? That's the things that I look forward to AI to do that really make a difference. Everyone's going to try and make money off AI. They're all talking about it. That's great. It's the next big thing, and it is. But let's talk about the humanity side of things and how we can help humanity with AI be a better place to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we think about so the internet 30 40 years ago, when it was in its infancy, it was nascent. It was very much considered by a lot of business leaders to be a bit of a luxury item. Like you say, there were a lot of folks who they didn't know what to make of it. There was a lot of kind of conversation. I was a little bit young, but I remember a lot of conversation around like, this is a fad. This will be a flash in the pan. I think you used the term flash in the pan before. It'll kind of fade out and be gone. But it didn't. And for a while, the internet was kind of a luxury item. It was something that people could use. Like it definitely had advantages for businesses and consumers, but it wasn't ubiquitous. You get into late 2000s, early 2010s, it becomes ubiquitous. And today, the internet is a lot more like a utility infrastructure, like sewer or electricity, than it is an optional product. And bandwidth and fiber, particularly, is becoming kind of the same. Like you have fiber carriers in major cities who are going down into the sewers and laying their own trunk, right? Like it is a utility. And I wonder sometimes if AI is on that same pathway. And certainly people have talked about that, at least in Canada, a little bit. Is AI the infrastructure of the future? And how do we ensure that it becomes infrastructure and is not just kind of a product which is commoditized and restricted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's interesting to see those cycles kind of repeat themselves in technology.
Well, I think, what AI gives us is the ability to respond within seconds on things, right? So if they're monitoring things, you can respond in seconds, nanoseconds probably, if something goes wrong, and that helps the utilities, right? So if you think it that way, from this whole monitoring thing, it's funny. I watch a lot of cop shows, and I'm like, you can't get away with anything anymore with all the cameras and AI and everything else. Like, yeah, just hang up your guns and just call it a day, because you're gonna get caught every time. It's just crazy. It's funny, you were talking about internet. At one point, I went to a conference in Vegas in '93 to learn about the internet. And Bill Gates was the keynote speaker, and he stood up there and he said, "The internet will never amount to anything. Put all your energies into the Microsoft network." The very next year, I went back and he said, "We're putting all of our energies into the internet. So if you want to sign up for all of our stuff, do." And so we did. And so we basically were part of the test team, where they were just throwing stuff against the wall to see what worked and didn't work. And how do you write database-driven websites and things like that when it, didn't really exist. It was kind of a crazy time.
Yeah. Fast forwarding to today, you're consulting, you're working with a bunch of different companies, really trying to help them figure out how to grow, which is we're very copacetic in that kind of sense. Like that's a lot of the work that I do as well, trying to help smaller companies, especially localized companies, figure out how to compete in their markets and figure out what their advantage points are compared to competitors that are sometimes larger. Maybe I'm just wired a little bit weird, but I really like that David versus Goliath kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about your clients today, is there a success story, or is there something that you can talk about that, without naming names, of course, but is there something you can talk about that you're particularly proud of? Something that you can sit down at night, put up your cap and say, yep, we did that. That was good.
I got multiples. I got a couple because what I'm working on in the last 3 years is more leadership development than anything. Because I believe that's the key to growing your business. So I had a client in Atlanta, and he was subletting his office out to this gentleman, and they had a conversation, and my client had a business development person, and the subletter said, hey, can I, but he was only using her part-time. He said, hey, can I use her the other half? It was ask her, but yeah, I'm fine with that, right? Well, after about 2 months, she's killing it for him, and he basically offers her a full-time position without talking to my client. So now my client calls me, and he is fuming, right? And so, I let him, tell me what he's going to do. He's yelling, I want that guy out of my office, and, effing this and effing that, right? And he's just all emotional. And I said, what are you going to do? He goes, I'm going to go back there and I'll punch him in the mouth and tell him, get out of my office. I go, no, you're not. So what do you ultimately want? He goes, well, I want him out of my office. I said, okay, then go tell him that. He's like, what? I said, just go tell him it's not working. You need him out of the office. Okay. Called me 3 minutes later, no exaggeration. Well, that was easy. I said, why? What happened? He goes, I walked back there and said, hey, this isn't working. I need you to move out. He said, by when? I said, by Friday. He said, done. Right? And so the reason I tell the story is that sometimes we lead with emotion, right? And so what I'm trying to get people to do is take that emotion out, get to what you ultimately want, and then address it, right? Because if you go after someone, our natural reaction is we're backed into a corner, we're going to come out fighting, right? It's just our natural reaction. So, those are some of the things. And then probably the other story that I'm most proud of is I have a client that I've had for 2.5 years now. A combination of helping him drive his business, being a better leader, identifying other opportunities, so on and so forth. He's grown his company from a $60,000 company to a $500,000 company in 2.5 years, right? And that's just because of all these little things. Again, for me, that's the one I'm most proud of, because he just didn't know where to go with things, right? And so I do think, and then it was funny, he'd say, why are we rehashing the same things? And I'd laugh at him and go, because you said we were going to do this and you did that. And until you do what we agree on, I'm going to keep talking to you about it, right? All right. And, and my goal is not to tell him what to do, but to get him to come up with something and then agree to do it, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't want to be the guy that's where he can put his finger and go, you told me to do this. Like, no. I ask the questions, right? And then I pick apart your solution until I can't pick it apart anymore. And then we kind of go, that looks like it'll work. Okay, good. Right. And so that's kind of how I go with things. And especially with leadership, he's much better now. He wasn't a great leader for his team. He's over controlling. And, that's one of the biggest issues that I find when I'm working with people is that they have to control everything and they can't get out of their own way. And when you can't get out of your own way, you're doomed for failure. So, yeah, so there'll be a couple of things for you.
Yeah. And we think about leadership and about those skill sets and a lot and whatnot. A lot of companies, and I see this so much, a lot of companies will have their framework in place, like their leadership hierarchy. You've got kind of your executive leadership, you've got directors, you've got mid-level managers, you've got supervisors, you've got individual contributors, what have you. It's all some kind of variation on that, usually, right? The structure of the organization. And a lot of companies, especially growing companies, smaller, younger companies that have found success, they're starting to scale. What they tend to do is they're high performing individual contributors who are just like doing awesome are offered a promotion to management, right? And it's just kind of assumed that nothing needs to happen in that step in the middle, right? So you have someone who is used to being a really good worker, doing their job, doing a great job. All of a sudden, they have to manage people, and the assumption is it's easy. You can just do it, but it's not the case.
Nope.
People who manage people and are responsible for really, unblocking them, leading them, helping them develop, reach their full potential. That's a very specialized skill set.
Yep.
And I have never found a company that pays due attention to that transformation process. Like no company that I've ever worked with, larger companies, banking, insurance, they tend to do this somewhat, but there's no company that says, here's the manual for becoming a manager.
Yeah.
And here is your training pathway. And here's how we're going to help support you as you become a good people leader and a good manager. Because ultimately, and this is also something that I have never heard a company say in this process. I've never heard a company say, okay, we're promoting you. And ultimately, your job now is to help the people who report to you become just as good as you. So your job is their success. That's a very different context to look at leadership through. And it does not get the attention it needs.
Well, and again, I've always been one, like through my ranks, I always look to find someone to do my job so that I could move up the ladder, right? A lot of times, I tell people that I go, just find someone to replace you. Well, what if they do it better than me? Then good, kudos for you. That means you trained him really good, right? Yeah, but then, where do I go, no, here's the problem. You're doing your job good. The boss is going to go, I don't want Paul to leave. He's doing his job perfect, right? I don't want him to move up because who's going to come up behind him? So it's your responsibility to find someone so that you can go to your boss and say, hey, I want to move up the ladder. By the way, Jeff's going to come behind me because I've been training him, right? A, that shows incentive for you doing that. But B, it just says, I'm okay, I'm comfortable with that. But that is not the case in most cases. Most people are very scared of their jobs. They don't want to share it, and they don't want to be replaced. So you're right. I mean, and then my biggest pet peeve is moving someone into a leadership position without training them. There's a stat that says 38% of people that get moved into a management job fail within the first 3.5 months for lack of training.
Yep, that I believe. And North American, it is. And North American businesses, on average, both the US and Canada, we spend a whole lot less per employee on professional development and training than comparable companies in the UK and European Union do. And I always found that very, very interesting because you think about business and kind of the epicenter of the world and everything, like North America. That's where the show is.
Right.
The Europeans tend to do a lot more investment in training than we do. And I find that kind of dissonance quite fascinating to think about.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, we are kind of coming to the close of our time here. So I want to talk a little bit about Pull the Chute. Can you give folks just the elevator pitch on Pull the Chute, what it is, what you do, and most importantly, how to contact you if folks want to get in touch and have a boo?
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, so Pull the Chute is basically a coaching company that helps leaders become better leaders, helps C-level people become better leaders, and helps the up-and-coming leaders develop, right? That's one of the biggest problems, right? If we have management in place and we want to help the next generation come up, we need to teach them. We have 4 different unique groups in the workforce, right? We have the boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the Gen Zers, and they communicate completely differently. And technology has changed completely over those 4 generations, if you think about it, how much it's changed. And so we kind of help people get better at that. The goal is that we love to do cohorts with companies. So if you're a company that has anywhere from 25 to 25,000 people, we do these little cohorts of 4 to 10 people. We meet twice a month for 90 minutes. We introduce a topic. And the goal is to get you to change the way that you think about things. We've been influenced about who we are as a leader based on our parents, friends around us, previous bosses, all that kind of stuff, managers, coaches. And so there's a better way to do this stuff sometimes. And so that's what we try to teach people to do that. And the goal is to get them to, quote unquote, as we said in the beginning, pull the chute, take a pause, work on themselves. and to get them to do that. So we love to do that. We have a blast doing it. The cool part is that when we leave, the reason we do the cohorts is that once we're done with you, we have other things if you wanted, but we could walk away and you could learn how to support, and you have, learned how to support each other. So you don't need a coach for years and years and years. This is let's teach you, and then you learn how to support each other. So at some point you can go, I can go, hey, Paul, we talked about this in class. I remember that. Help me. Here's what I got going on. What are your thoughts? Right. And you're going to gladly help out. So that's kind of some of the stuff that we like to look at. If you want to learn more, you can go to pullthechute.net. And again, think of a parachute. So pull the chute is with CHUTE, but pullthechute.net. If you want to reach out to me, Jeff at pullthechute.net. If you want to learn more, go on Amazon, look my name up, and I got a couple of books up there. And you can visit our podcast. Pull the Chute is the podcast. It's on all the major platforms. And yeah, I think that's it. It's probably enough.
Brilliant. Well, folks at home, don't feel the need to pause and rewind and pause and rewind. I will put all of that in the show notes, so you can just hop there and check it out. Jeff Sesol, founder and CEO of Pull the Chute. Thanks so much for joining me on the show. I am glad that you were here today.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciated it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Journey in Conversation. If you liked this episode, follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. More builders, more breakthroughs, coming soon.